So I guess we can get started with our industry interview for tonight. So I have Kirk Benshoff, who is hi everybody. He's the creative director at First Second. And Kirk's had a long career in design and working with books. And so I'm really excited because Kirk and we've only known each other for like a year and a half or so. Yeah. But we've overlapped with many people, and I think we know many people in common. So I'm really excited, Kirk, to just start off by getting to know you better. All the questions that I haven't been able to ask you in the course of like having business conversations. I would just like to know, how did you end up where you are today?
It's interesting. I would say the first big portion of my career was experimenting with different industries. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology, which was a school that had you studying people like Lester Beale, Milton Glaser, Massimo Vignelli, these studio designers that were sort of catch-all people. So they're, Vanity Fair would hire you to design their magazine, or you would, IBM would hire you to do a logo. So, but they didn't really talk to us about like what the different industries were, and if you were to actually go into that industry. So the first big portion of my time out of school was bouncing around, and I worked in medical publishing for a number of years, and I went into magazine. Then I segued into web design, which was horrible. Hated it. It was, and I was in web for many years, and and then like in those, I was working for. Like I worked for like small companies, big companies. Like I was at Viacom, like Nickelodeon at Viacom, and really just kind of got a taste of the different environments. But I had worked in some iteration of children's publishing for a number of years between Nickelodeon and a number of other companies, and so an opportunity opened up at Little Brown Books for Young Readers, and I think at the time they were excited to have somebody who was going to bring a different perspective to their design. So I started, that was my foray. That was after about 7 or 8 years of bouncing around into book design. And then once I was at LBYR, I shortly after that time is when they acquired Yen Press. So that's when I started working on comics, mainly Japanese manga and Korean manhwa type projects. And then I bounced around. So left LBYR to do Orbit Books. And so I started bouncing around the book publishing world, which was really exciting because I was in children's and then comics. Then I was in sci-fi fantasy for a number of years. I did commercial fiction for a while. And so you really got a taste of those, like sort of like very specific niches within book publishing. But then after having left Hachette, eventually landed the opportunity at Macmillan. So which is great because the First Second ended up needing, like I needed to tap into all of that previous experience. So it was kind of this great, serendipitous moment that, I happened to, it's all this seemed to be like a perfect build up to this job. So
when you were at Scholastic, were you working on graphic novels or no?
So when I was at Scholastic, we were working on comics, but we not under the graphics imprint. A big part of what I was working on there was their early reader program, Branches and Acorn. So we were doing a lot of comics under that umbrella, and then nonfiction. And so around the time that I left, I was pitching a number of nonfiction projects for us, comic projects for us to do. But it was mainly the Branches and Acorn early reader line, which is an incredible area to go into.
So how did you get the job at First Second?
It's actually really funny. When I was at Hachette, I was at the time I was at Orbit and Yen Press, and Colleen had left the position. At the time, it was listed as a senior designer position. And so I ended up applying for it, and I got talking with Mark, and he was like, "Oh, this is good." Although, because I was an art director over there. And so he was like, I think you might be overqualified for this. And I was like, well, let me tell you, I would just love to work for First Second. And I just gonna put it out there. I don't care. It's a senior designer position. I want to work. So I wrote this like impassioned email. I was like, I went to the place where I said, like, I want my kids to know that they can go for the job they want, not the job they think they should have, and all that stuff. And it was hysterical, but it was amazing. Like, I mean, it was so great. Like, he was really receptive to it. He's like, all right, you make a good case, come on in. So I came in and I met Mark and Callista and the team that was there at the time. And I never ended up getting the job. They hired Andrew Arnold. But it made sense. Like, it made sense for them to hire Andrew. Andrew needed to take that position at that time. But I was really lucky. Mark kept me filed away in the back of his brain. And when Andrew was leaving, he reached out to me. So.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay.
People, never be gun shy about opening your heart to somebody about a job. If it's something that means a lot to you, you have nothing to lose.
Just out of curiosity, are there any people here on this call who are interested in a job in comics publishing? Not just working as a creator, but like working as an editor or a designer or something like that. Maybe you can talk or put comments in the chat. Okay, I thought maybe there would be some people. So do you have any tips about that, Kirk? Like, if you're interested in breaking into like working for a comics publisher, or,
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that there's a level of persistence. I think that's the important thing. If it's not, I talk to people a lot about breaking into industries in general, like whether it's comics or whether it's children's publishing. And I think the most important thing is to actually be doing what you work in it in any capacity, because then you are in that industry. Like, there's no formal definition of like, you have to be doing X, Y, and Z to be considered working in the industry. If you're doing it, you are a part of the industry. It's how far and what paths in the industry you want to go, and working and collaborating with people is key. And that's ultimately what it is. And I think when people are creating for themselves, you are in control of everything. When you are working in a corporate environment, and when you have to work with other people, you have to be able to collaborate with other people. And so it's that aspect of your skill set that you have to let people know that you can do, that you can collaborate. And so work with people. So, like, if even though you're an artist, take on a coloring job, and work on that, or start with flatting and go from there, or find ways to not only do the things specifically that you want to do, but find ways that'll allow you to collaborate with other people. And it's that part of your professional self that will start resonating out, and then it will start allowing you to make connections and land gigs closer to where you want to be in the long term. Because I think that's the most important thing. I mean, it's like ultimately when people are creating for themselves, you get to make the decisions for everything. When you work for a company, you have to collaborate with your editor, with marketing, sales, your publisher. You have to, other art departments. There's so many people. And so finding people who are not only skilled to work in that space, but also able to communicate and collaborate is key. And it's a shockingly difficult thing, skill set to find with people.
So since you were talking so much about collaboration, that's a really good segue into what I was going to ask you, but I want everybody here on the call to be thinking about the questions that you have, because I don't want to be asking all the questions for sure. And I know a lot of you probably want to ask Kirk some stuff directly. So before I open it up to the floor, speaking about collaboration, can you talk about what is it like when a creator first gets signed by First Second from the perspective of working with the art department, like you helping them get set up to, deliver the files that you're going to need, like talking about the production schedule. Just walk us through like what happens in that whole process.
The very first thing that I will do is I set up a kickoff call with my creators. That's the absolute first thing that I do. And it's really a stabilizing conversation for me to, like get the lay of the land, not only for the artist, but also so that the artist knows what to expect from us. So, it gives me, if I'm working with somebody for the first time, what I'll do is actually go over our process, what to expect. We tend to be very structured with how we do everything, and it's on purpose because in my mind, when I say big five publishers, I mean, not only like, Harper and Penguin and Random House and Hachette and Macmillan, but I also mean places like Candlewick and like the smaller houses that don't have a lot of experience in doing comics. It's really important to me that, like some structure and process starts to emerge across everybody, because right now it's a little bit inconsistent, I think is the best way to put it, in terms of process with everybody. So we tend to be very structured about that because it allows the creator to know what milestones they need to hit. It allows the publisher to know when to expect certain things. And then my eyes, I feel like it allows us to also free up the mental space to think about the sort of the creative nuances for the project. So the first thing that we'll do is just really go over the process, the steps and what to expect. But then the other side of it is me getting into my creator's brain to say, like, what do you want to do for this project? Like, what are your expectations for the project? Like, what are you looking to do? And because the thing is there's so many things you can do with a product. Are you going to do it in 4-color? Are you going to do it in limited color? Is it going to be, limited color in a 4-color, printing process? Or are we doing true limited with 2 PMS colors? What's the story arc? What are the visual tools that you want to use in the book that we can that we need to figure out? All of these things sort of compound on each other, and it's good. Like, I mean, it could be something as simple as, I want to use color in a very specific way, to communicate, X part of the story. I had another book where I realized like the author was planning on actively using 4 different languages in the book. And I was like, I need to know that because I needed editors and copy editors who were going to know these languages and basically know how to edit the book. So it's a lot of, sort of strategizing really in the beginning. And that's and it's like, for me, as soon as I get the intro email, they're like, great, we just signed the contracts, we just acquired this book. That's when I'm setting up the call with everybody.
So I just before I open it up to questions, one follow-up question to that. So when creators are working on a pitch, what aspects of the specs or the production aspect of the book should they be thinking about or have decided upon? And then what should they not worry about until once the book's been signed up, and then they can have a conversation with you and the editor?
I think the important to think about with a pitch is that you are selling your, like you have an interested editor selling your book in a meeting called acquisitions. And acquisitions is basically sales, marketing, school and library reps. Sometimes there's field reps that are there, publishers, other editors, you name it. Everybody's there, and the editor is saying, all right, I've got project A here that I think is really, really great, and I want to sell this. The thing that I think a lot of details that like people forget is when a publisher is about to take on a project, when they're about to acquire a project, they're about to front a ton of money and resources. So in this acquisitions meeting, like the publisher needs to, all publishers for that matter, are going to take a step back and say, all right, one, do we like this project? And, do we think that, like we can sell this and make a profit, or at the very least break even? And so so it's a conversation where sales is going to look at it and say, I know my accounts are going to be interested in this. This is totally right up their alley. You have our support. School and libraries will say the same thing. So when you're putting together your pitch, what you need to do is you are selling the concept of this book. And it's a hard question to answer in terms of specifics because every project is going to be different. But what you really want to do is you want to think about the imagery. Maybe it's like the first few pages of the book, but you have a very detailed outline of what the overall story arc is going to be. Maybe you have the first, quarter of the book done so everybody can read and really kind of immediately get into the groove and get, hooked into the story. Maybe it's character designs and an outline. It's really, it's on a case by case, but I think that's where, talking to folks like you, Jana, or talking with other people in the industry to kind of get a sense of like, what do you think about this? Is this, friends who are into comics or other friends who have been published in some capacity, who have a general sense of the tenor of how things are working, run things by those people, and then it's a good sense of like, all right, is this leaving you any questions about like what this product experience is going to be? Because ultimately, what you want is you want everybody to look at this and be like, I get it. And you know what? I like this. And let's take a lot of money, throw it at this project and try to make it fly, but I mean, those are the obstacles. That's ultimately every project that goes into an acquisitions meeting is we are trying to convince the company to basically front a lot of money to support it. And so that pitch material needs to communicate that. And you don't want to go too overboard because you don't want to paint yourself in a corner either. So, you don't want to be like, well, the book is done, like this is the main character, you want like a level of flexibility. And so I think it's a balance. It's unfortunately not the concrete answer that a lot of people like to get from me. But what I like to do is just be very frank about the acquisitions process, and in the hopes that that actually helps kind of allow people to sort of understand like that immediate goal, and that the immediate goal at that point is to sell people on the project, while still giving yourself flexibility to do changes if you need to.
Leo, I really liked your question. Can you ask your question?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Kirk. This is great so far. I'm really excited to hear your talk and the rest of what you have to offer. But my question was about, as the art director at First Second, is there any cross-pollination between you and other projects at Macmillan, or is your process exclusive to First Second, or do you share any of that? Is it proprietary, or do you share that with other imprints at Macmillan?
I share it very much. My team is actually responsible for the graphic novels under Roaring Brook and FSG as well. And I am a very vocal person with people at other houses as well, to try to create a structure, even beyond, another thing that we do that's very important to me, that I'm very vocal about, is a stage that I call our proof of concept stage. And this is something that we fit in pencils early on, but it's a stage where we're thinking about all the visual tools that we want to use in the project, and bringing examples of those pages to final, so we can look and make sure that they're looking the way that we want to, but we're looking at these different instances as tools and how we're using these tools in the book as a whole. And then ultimately what we're doing is we're taking these pages, and then we ultimately send these out to get proofed. So like very early on, we are finding out like whether these pages are looking the way that we want to. Are there any issues? Do we need to fix anything? Should we push anything? Is there a concept that we've touched upon that we think that we can exploit and that could actually help the story even more? Because ultimately there are so many steps in this process, from literally how you're constructing your files, all the way to like the size of your type on the page, that it gets overwhelming. And I find a lot of people are making these decisions on the fly while they're creating their pages, but then many times you find yourself sort of painted in the corner later, and it's very hard to fix those when you need to. So this is a specific stage where we are really kind of pulling back the lens, taking a macro view of the project as a whole, thinking about the tools that we want to use, and then now we have our style guide. So then when the creator is going back and working on the book later, they're focusing on the storytelling. They're not doing storytelling and 101 other decisions at the same time. Things like that I am annoyingly vocal about at my company, with the creators at the other imprints. I was just on the phone with some friends of mine at Hachette just today, because I think it's these steps, these things that you find versions of with other formats. Like picture books, there's a set format, there's a certain expectations of what things are when and how things are handled, and it's pretty universal across all the houses, but it's not necessarily consistent with graphic novels. And so I'm really vocal about wanting to get some level of consistency, so that everybody knows what to expect and the focus can be on the creative details of the project.
Fantastic, Kirk. I had just one follow-up. You mentioned Roaring Brook and FSG. What's your relationship with Fywell?
So if you were to take MCPG and you were to break them into two columns, there's Fywell and Holt on one side, and then there's Roaring Brook and FSG and First Second. Actually, technically third, because there's Odd Dot. So there's Odd Dot, Fywell and Holt, and then Roaring Brook, FSG, and First Second in the third column. So I'm in that third column with those imprints. The old corporate structure, the corporate pillar structure.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Courtney.
Hi, Kirk. Thank you for meeting with us tonight. I know this is going to be super beneficial. I'm curious, to what extent is the art department, maybe specifically with you and at First Second, or even at other places that you've been, to what extent are they tasked with creating things, whether it be logos or different ways of putting the book together in one file? Like, how can the art department help me?
And by me, you're saying the artist, right?
Yes, yeah, me as the creator,
Gotcha.
visual person. Yeah, sorry, I guess I should have specified, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that's great. So design, under our structure, design is broken up into two parts. We sort of have we sort of have like a production assistant, and then book build assistant later, like help later. So while the book is actively being created, design is there to basically help facilitate and make the book happen. So it could be as simple as like, why is my Photoshop giving me this error and I can't get anything done because of it? I can jump in and help you navigate that stupid Photoshop error. But it could be, like I'm working on this nonfiction book and I'm supposed to communicate this complex idea and I'm struggling. We'll get on the horn and we will brainstorm ideas on how to navigate to that visually. It could be a difficult scene in the book. It's really sort of like an active as needed basis, while also helping during the proof of concept phase, where we're really establishing the style guide and the visual tools for the book. At a certain point, once that artist is in a groove, design is taking a step back and just kind of letting that creator do their thing. Like at a certain point, they're kind of like, all right, I'm doing it. This is great. I'm on it. Good. And then they're finishing their book. When all the art is in, design steps in, and now design, I have a team of designers that will come in and actually start building the book. And at this point, we have a bunch of things they'll start happening. The cover design is going to happen. And when the cover design is going to happen, that's where we're going to get the branding for the book. So that's where we're going to get the titling. And and we really try to make sure that this is a collaborative process, making sure that we're figuring out like what our overall cover concept is going to be, how we're going to handle the type and the overall layout of that, because what's done there is going to cascade for the interior, because we're not going to use 50 million different fonts and everything. So a lot of the lettering that's started on the front cover is going to cascade into the title page design. It's going to cascade into chapter heads if there's chapter heads. But my team will then also start really thinking about what the look and feel of the front of the book is going to look like, and what the design of the pages in the back of the book are going to look like. So what I always again, I repeat myself a lot, so my team gets really annoyed with me, but I'm constantly telling them, like, use the pages in the front of the book, use the pages in the back of the book, think of them as like the opening credits to a film and the ending credits to a film. So, use those pages to help set up the first page of the story. And so here, that's where design will come in and actually start learning, because at that point, all the interior of the book is done. Right. So like now we're like, oh, this weight's kind of taken off our shoulders, and we're like, all right, great. Now all the interior is done. So now we can dot the I's and cross the T's and do some really cool art for the title page and the copyright. I'm like, we don't have to, if we want to shove the copyright information in the window of a car, let's do it. Let's just make these pages look pretty. And we're really kind of putting everything together at that point. And so that's where really design will come in, and depending, I have some creators that are OCD. They want, you know, like a creative say on everything. So they're going to be like, all right, I like, you know, can we change that font a little bit? Or I have other people, they don't care. They're like, all right, I'm done. You guys go nuts, you know? So it's really about what that creator needs or wants. But yeah, designs offerings can range quite a bit.
That's great. Thank you. I also had another question if that's okay if I go back to back. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was this is a little bit off the last topic, or has nothing to do with the last topic a little bit, but what happens when timelines change? Like say the script takes a little too long, say I end up moving and I lose all my stuff, or you know, there's a death in the family. How does that affect what you do? And we're not even going to get into like the book shortage that's going to happen. So just like upon normal circumstances that we are accustomed to, how do you handle that?
I think the most important thing is to make sure that you are having a open conversation with in the acquisition start, like in the contract stage of the process. That is the most important thing. Every publisher is going to be different, and everyone's going to handle it different. And when I actually say publisher, I'm going to go down and say like every imprint is going to be different. And that is an absolutely important thing to remember, because every imprint has their own set of rules. And I am very timidly going to say they have their own ethics as well. So it is absolutely important for you in the contract stage to make sure that you are communicating what you need, because that is the time to define it. And so, because if a imprint turns around and says like, okay, so we're looking to get this art in a year, and artist A is saying, all right, well, I really want to get this, but I don't want to push too hard. I just want to make sure I ink this deal. That is when they're going to expect it. And if you need a year and a half, if you need 2 years, I mean, you need to be reasonable. It needs to be a conversation, because the publisher might be expecting this to happen at a certain time, but it has to be an active conversation where you are communicating what you need. And if you need help to make those dates, that needs to be communicated at the beginning, because that is when money is being allocated for different resources in the beginning. So it's just very, very, very important is just not be gun shy. Do not be timid. You need to communicate that. Now, cascading from that is going to be there are things that are outside of your control. Most understanding publishers, if there's a death in the family, you fall ill, somebody broke into your house and stole everything and you need to rebuild, most people are going to be very understanding of this and then recalibrate. But these are fair questions to ask. And again, I think it goes to doing as much research as you can with people and specific imprints. Get knowledge of those specific imprints, because every imprint is just going to like literally function completely on their own. Like many of them are great, but it's the onus is going to be on the creator to do a little due diligence.
Thank you. A quick follow-up. So I know you said like be clear in the contract stage, all that. I'm working with a writer right now. We're actually with FSG, Fast Break. I don't know, you probably got a big plate, but the script is taking about 3 months longer than I anticipated, and they wanted roughs done by January. And I'm like, it's about 3 months off. There's 40 extra pages that I didn't anticipate. I don't know if I'm going to be able to deliver this book on time. So it's,
yeah, absolutely. And I think communication is just absolutely key.
yeah.
it's just like, I think, just an email to say, hey, this is running really behind. I'm, the original schedule is not, that is out of your control. But the time that you need to execute certain stages it's still there. And so, I think one thing that I will say is another factor that's happening right now is that there is a large influx of editors and folks who are acquiring graphic novels but don't have as much experience with graphic novels as they do with picture books and prose. There are many instances, whether it's an overall imprint mentality or an editor's mentality, and I'm not thinking anyone specifically, but that they immediately will lump graphic novels into a picture book headspace, and it's not a picture book headspace. And so, and I think that is just like the friendly reminder to folks, just be like, hey, just a friendly reminder that this is a 200 and some odd page book, and it's going to be a lot of work. And so, and editors too, they get caught up. They have books that are bouncing around. They sometimes lose track of things. They're human as well. I don't want to paint, people in a negative light. They're going to be human. They're going to lose track of projects. They're going to make mistakes. But I think it's just absolutely imperative to make sure that you have a clear and polite voice that just says, hey, I have concerns with X, Y, and Z, and just keep it an amicable conversation. And, and that's the best course.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Awesome. All right. So Teresa, I think you had a question in the chat. Are you here?
Yeah, I am. Thanks. So hi again, Kirk. You did a great webinar for us for Indiana SCBWI a while back, and I didn't really get to enjoy that because, when you're hosting, you can't enjoy it as much. So anyway, I have a quick question, and it just shows you how green I am. But so I'm writing a biographical graphic novel, and my editor showed me concept sketches, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be looking for besides, do the subjects look like, themselves? So as, an art director, can you give me some pointers of how I can sound intelligent?
So when you say concept sketches, are they saying that this is the art style that they want you to be following, or did they contextualize those in any way?
Not really. It's I think they just, I don't know. She just said, any comments? And I'm like, So the artist, the illustrator, has done sketches of the main character and one of the secondary characters and some of the environment scenes, architecture and stuff. And I mean, to me, they look gorgeous, but what do I know?
I think, okay, that makes sense. I think like really a lot of times what will happen is you'll actually get a what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like a pre-development stage of kind of establishing rather like a real style guide, like what everything's going to be like. So what the characters are going to look like, what the environments are going to look like. Again, because many of these decisions are going to be repeated over and over and over again. So we want to make sure that everything's looking the way that they should before. So it sounds like they're just showing you everything to make sure that you don't see any red flags. So for nonfiction, that can be period. Is architecture being represented in the right way? Technology represented the correct way, clothing. If there is a main character, is that main character rendered in a way that you feel is accurate? and everything. So it sounds like they are showing you these very early stages just so that you can weigh in before it's just done and repeated.
Is that
Okay,
helpful,
makes
Teresa?
sense. Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, so I mean, to my untrained eye, I think it looks great. So yeah, no, that was helpful. Thank you.
Cool. So Jeff and Ashley, I think you had a question.
Hi, yeah. So just as we're, kind of entering this world of graphic novels, just kind of curious, what is the typical or the expected timeline for creators to deliver like the art for, say, a middle grade graphic novel after signing a deal? We're looking at like 112-ish pages.
Again, this is something that you need to make sure that you are being honest and vocal about with the in the contract stage. We have some creators that I don't know how they do it. They will bang out books in the most absurd time frame. I don't think they sleep. And gauging by their social media, it doesn't look like they are sleeping. But I think the general time frame for first second that we will allot is for a 200 and some odd page book, we will allot about 3 to 6 months for thumbnails and pencils. We'll get a lot around a year for inks, and then 3 to 6 months for color. That is not always an absolute. We have some artists that can work faster. We have some scenarios where we will ask for things to be done faster than that because we want to meet a more aggressive time schedule. And then we have some people who are working on some insane magnum opus, and it's, we're on year 6 right now and we still haven't seen anything. So it's I would say on average, for the most part, we are allotting around a year and a half to 2 years for our books. But what I would say is, know yourself as an artist and how fast you can work. The faster a book can hit market, the faster people are going to be seeing final payments and royalties, but you also don't want to kill yourself either. So I think it's a matter of just being realistic about what you can do. And excuse me, I think it would be, be realistic about what you can do. And again, make sure you're having a conversation with people in the like in the contract stage. Like that is the most absolutely important thing, because the thing is like ultimately is if you need help, like if it's important for the publisher to get something out quicker to market, then it's the onus is on the publisher to, and then they really want you to do it. Then it's like a back and forth of then trying to figure out like ways to make it happen.
All right, Alondra, you had a question in the chat.
I did. Okay. So my question is more of like having a bilingual dialogue. So my characters tend to be more speaking Spanish, Spanglish, and occasionally just incorrect Spanish for like immigrants first generation. So I wanted to know if that's going to be a primary factor of my dialogue. How would I write that in a script to make sure everybody's on the same page? Should I only have the script in pure English? Should I have it like the areas that are Spanish be written in Spanish and then have a bracket with English text? Or do I have to be more specific, like this is what I'm going for? Yes, the Spanish is supposed to be incorrect because the character has local Spanish. That's just basically my question.
I think a really interesting book for you to check out would be Himawari House. That's coming out very soon. That was hit with some shipping delays, but definitely check that out. That is about foreign exchange students in Korea. So one, like and they're all roommates. One is native to Korea, another is a foreign exchange student from China, another one is from Japan. And so their unifying language is English. And so it's like in that particular situation, editorially, they, it was a big conversation about exactly like how to bring in their sort of interpreted versions of English into this specific scenario. That's going to be an editorial conversation. And I think like in your pitch, when you're talking to the editor, that's something that's part of the pitch is going to be like, this is a big part of the story is going to be language. And I think that's when you're going to want to, like, that's going to be a very important conversation with then how an editor is going to want to interpret that and handle that in the book. And so, and that can be handled in a bunch of different ways. There is no absolute. I think there's really, I know with Himawari House, the author actually wrote an intro to the book to kind of explain like, this is going to be the experience you're going to be experiencing, and this is why. I hope that answers your question. It's really like it's definitely like something like a very important editorial part in the process, and something that would definitely going to be part of that intimate editorial relationship that you would have.
Yes, I greatly appreciate that. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's so integral to the plot. Like, how do I make sure not to confuse the editorials or like the pitching without underselling my story? If that makes sense.
Right, absolutely. And I think you can be like very in the pitch itself, you can find a way to articulate exactly what you were just saying to me on this call, and that there's an important language is an important, I'm open to how best represent it, but this is why it's important to the story, X, Y, and Z. And so I think you can definitely, you can touch upon it without necessarily having, because again, this is why we have our publishing dynamic, is because we have experts in their particular fields, whether it's sales, it's marketing, but editorial, like, an editor is going to see this diamond and be like, oh gosh, all right, I love this. This is where I want to polish it up and make it shine super bright.
Okay, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Des, I think you were the next person who had a question.
Yeah, thank you. My question has to do with cover design.
Hmm.
I noticed you worked on CC journals.
Yes.
And I noticed that there's a difference between usually when they cross over the pond, as they say, the covers changed. And if my question is, are you doing that specifically for the US market? And if you are, what elements or what aspects are you considering particular to that market? Why those changes are made? Thank you.
Oh, it's such a great question. It's so interesting. It is so bizarre how different markets are around the world. It's so fascinating. It's like there are some designs that I do stateside that in France, they think it's garish. There are things that are done in the UK market that that I've looked at and I'm like, huh. Okay, it's like, but it's their market, it's the buying audience is just very different. And so a lot of times what we are doing is, adjusting things that in a way that we feel is going to best speak to our US audience. And a lot of times we'll take a cover and just feel like, because like ultimately with cover design, the books are on a shelf with other like titles, And we need to make sure that they're going to stand out and that they're going to grab attention in the same way as the other titles that are in the marketplace. If we were to take a step back, if you go to like really big publishing houses and they have like really strong backlist books that were written 20, 30 years ago, but they still sell really, really well. They have design teams that are constantly revisiting backlist titles and refreshing them to make sure that they're staying current with the design trends. Otherwise, books will start looking dated. Kids will look at it and be like, and then just toss it aside. So in some ways, we're doing a similar thing where we're saying like, we love this book, we love the content, just the art isn't quite, or the cover design isn't quite where it needs to be in order to stay competitive in the US market. And that's when we, we'll adjust the design.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, I got really distracted by the conversation about mayonnaise in the chat. There was no, somebody else had a really good question. Whoa, oh, Gibson.
I'm not being pejorative. Miracle Whip is not mayonnaise. It's a completely different product.
Agreed. My mom lied to me my whole childhood.
Yeah.
I was lied to as well.
I had a question. Oh yeah. What are your thoughts about projects that are at least in one version complete, like the art is complete for an entire, let's call it artistic draft? Like, what are your thoughts on how those would proceed or how to pitch them?
So I think it would be important to communicate if you're the level of changes that you're willing to make on it. I think a lot of people might look at it and be like, oh gosh, it's finished. How set are they with the final product? Because it's going to be inevitable that in most instances, there is going to be feedback and requested changes. Now, that being said, in our world of social media and in our world of the internet, the web has like really allowed us to overcome one of the most difficult hurdles with comic publishing, and that's distribution. I mean, like for a long time, people were making their little mini comics, and they were selling them, and that was how they got their names out. That's how they built their audience, and by going to comic conventions and kind of hitting the road and really getting their name out that way. But now, because there's so many avenues, in some cases people can actually build their audience right on their own without actually ever leaving their house. They can just, they work on their computer, they hit the send button, and then all of a sudden, it's now the world can see their product and they can start building a fan base. In situations like that, a publisher can go in, like if a creator has created a product and it's developed a fan base, and there is a following already, that can be a case where something is picked up and not a lot's requested in terms of changes, because you're already showing a track record, you're already showing some success behind it. But ultimately, and this kind of goes back to the very realistic side of acquisitions, when a book goes into acquisitions, that editor is saying, okay, publishing house, I'm looking for you to invest a lot of money into this product. And if, at that point, people might say, oh, I think this is actually really cool, but I think it would be interesting if we can, make these changes or modify this or add this, or et cetera, because they're going to want to make sure that they can make it the best that they think that it can be in order for it to to sell well, quite honestly. And so in that sense, so to go back to your question, I think it's important to, if you have something like that, I would talk to folks, gauge them, and you can say, is there a way that, like, if you're completely open, to any or all feedback, you could show, kind of create we actually used to do a lot of these sales materials. They're called blads. So it'd be like a couple of chapters that leaves you on a cliffhanger, like a strategically placed cliffhanger. And then you could just say, like, this is where I'm at. I'm open to all feedback. Or you could supply the whole thing, you think strategically about it. But I think the big thing is communicating where your head's at about potential changes and modifications to that amount of work that's already been created.
No, assuming that somebody is completely open to feedback and to changes, how would you suggest including that in a pitch? Like, would you leave it out altogether that it's completed, or just say this is a completed draft? I am completely open to changes.
I think I think either could work. I think as long as you're completely upfront about where your head's at, I think either could work. Yeah.
One quick follow-up, if I could. Is there any kind of deterrent to a manuscript or a comic in its entirety being limited availability on the internet, like say to a Patreon audience? Like, is that a deterrent to being acquired?
It's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know. I'm gonna guess no. Because again, one of the things that you're going to benefit from with a publishing house is the marketing and sales machine that goes behind it. And so they're going to be selling it into Barnes and Noble. They're going to be selling it into independent bookstores and whatnot, and giving it a level of exposure that the Patreon page may not have. But I can't give you 100% on that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was very, very illuminating. Thank you very much for speaking with us tonight as well.
Oh, thanks.
Actually, Kirk, you said something that made me think of a question that I wanted to ask you about. So most of the conversation that we've had so far this evening has been about creators coming to you and bringing you their projects as pitches. But could you talk a little bit about when First Second gets a manuscript and you need to put together a creative team for it? How can you talk about how you go about doing that?
Oh my gosh. Like, all I can say is as much as you can put on your website, express what your interests are on your website, examples of that work on your website. I yearn for as much of that as humanly possible, because that's key to me. We do a fair amount of product development, in that, we could have a manuscript that comes in and we're going to be building the team, or we could have like our World Citizen comics. It's a great example where we have an adult prose topic on like the Second Amendment or media literacy that we think is really good, and we want to adapt that into a graphic novel format. So we're going to need a team to do that. And so finding talent, do you have interest in doing nonfiction, or you name it, like color, if you want to do coloring, like doing examples of coloring styles that that you would want to try. I think that those are all the things, because ultimately what I spend a lot of time doing is going on websites, looking at people, but then I need examples to show my colleagues. Like if someone has a website and says, my name's Kirk Benshoff and I want to be a comic book artist and I want to ink, and then they show me like 3 images and that's it. It doesn't help me. Like I need a range of things to show my colleagues to say that, like, not only do I think that this person has the style that we're looking for, but they have the skill set to be consistent with that style, that they have a range in case we want to ask for modifications to that style. And if you have an interest in doing niche things like black and white comics versus limited color comics versus full color, to everything in between, getting those examples on there is key. It's so key.
And how do you find the artist websites that you're going on? Like, what do you have any tips for creators who are artists who are looking for work as illustrators with graphic novels? How to get themselves noticed?
That's a hard one. Because a lot of it is word of mouth for me. It really is. Like, people come and they send, I think it's really, that's really, I wish that there was like a good, there's a business idea for somebody, but like getting like some sort of repository that's not cluttered with ads, that's easy. I think a lot of times that's what I use Instagram for. Instagram for me is that social connection that connects creators and together, and then ultimately is that mini portfolio. And then it's key that there's a link to your website that has like a more detailed, organized presentation. But that's really, I think probably Instagram, sadly, because it's, like sort of that bastard child of Facebook, but it's but it serves that purpose of sort of connecting people laterally that no other service is doing.
I think to follow up with what you said, Kirk, about word of mouth, I mean, that's true for me too. Like, I get so much information through word of mouth, and I feel like that can feel really like, for a creator, like, I don't know how to build word of mouth. But I think actually what we're doing right here is sort of part of that. It's just like getting to know other creators, showing up for events, getting out into the world and talking to people, and then people start to know who you are, and you just never know who's gonna remember you in a conversation. Like, I'm looking for somebody who does XYZ, and then that person might think of you and mention
I think
you.
you're 110% right. I mean, one thing that I've always loved about children's publishing in general is there are a ton of really great organizations that literally connect people together. I mean, I'm seeing familiar faces here that I met at SCBWI, and I think that's just SCBWI, and then there's like Highlights Foundation, and it's really and then with this group here, it really is like an opportunity for people to connect, share, bounce ideas, like pitches. I think like getting together in a group like this and talking to people within this group and sharing pitch ideas, that's key, because there's some people here who are going to have more experience than others, but this is a great hot melting pot to get feedback. And with SCBWI and other organizations, it's a great, it's a big industry, but it's a big small town, if you will.
Yeah. So Leo had another question I think that everybody was interested in hearing you answer.
Yeah, Kirk, you mentioned limited palettes and full color, and I was wondering, is there really a production cost benefit for working in limited palette and versus full color? Because I think even earlier you mentioned, limited palette printed as full color. And then, what would that artwork look like? Are you actually working in shades of gray?
I'd say that's interesting. So it's really what the desired effect for the final printed book is. You like what you want. Ultimately, whether you print in 2-color, 3-color, or 4-color, that cost is going to be the cost difference is shockingly negligible. It's really what the desired effect is. One of the benefits with printing in PMS inks is consistency. When you're printing in process inks, what's happening is on the sheets, you can have page 2 on one side of the sheet, and then you can have like page 15 on the other side of the sheet. And so what'll happen is what colors on page 15 can influence the colors on page 2 because of the direction that the paper is physically hitting the press. So if you, for those crazy detailed artists out there, if you start looking at page by page and you are doing a limited palette using process inks, you will notice that the colors do vary fairly significantly, not noticeable to the general public, but you'll notice that they vary fairly significantly throughout the whole book. With PMS inks, what those inks are is what you get, and they're not going to be affected by anything. And you're also going to get a gamut of colors that are not possible with process inks as well. Process ink does not play well with orange and purple. So when people see true purple and see true orange, people have this sort of like knee-jerk, like, oh, whoa, why does that look so beautiful? And it's because like we're so used to process ink everywhere, and it looks like crap everywhere. But when you see those beautiful purples and those beautiful oranges, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So creators can start playing with like really cool color combinations in the interiors of their book. It could be with fluorescence, it could be with metallics. You can do all these really cool things with true limited color. But if you go down that road where like when it's super easy to print in process, it's the default of every piece of software out there. It's like you don't even have to do anything. You just create it. It's in CMYK. Everyone's like, yay. But with True Limited, you have to like really approach the file construction very strategically.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So, any last question for Kirk? We're going to end on that highly technical note.
No, that's not my question, but it's something that I see on the chat about the shipping delays, because I think that's a huge issue across all publishing industry. So maybe he has something to say about that, about maybe how much time do Kirk thinks those delays can affect the rest of forthcoming releases and such.
I wish I had a good detailed answer for you on that one. I think if there's one thing like the past 18 to 20 months have really proven to us is that there's just like, you have to just be prepared. You have to be prepared for just about anything. It was interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, we just had no idea what the hell was going to happen. I mean, it was scary, and was there just going to be just like a massive collapse about everything, and how is that going to affect our business? There has been some level of stability, but there are these aspects that are popping up. The shipping is one of them. We just don't know. Right now, ultimately across the board, you're just seeing people fighting for space on ships. That's just what it boils down to in its simplistic form. And how that's going to pan out, it can, like in 3-4 months, it could take a downturn, or it could take an upturn, or it could be staying the same. but I think that's, I think the best answer I can give right now is just what we do is we are adjusting for the moment. We're adjusting for what's needed right now. And then we're we're kind of like crossing our fingers beyond that. So.
All right. Well, we do have 2 more questions. So are you okay with answering a few more?
Oh,
Kurt?
sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Courtney.
Hi, I wanted to maybe try and end on a fun one. I hope Rivka's is fun too. But what has your favorite project been that you've like worked on ever, or even just exclusively at First Second? What's your favorite project that you've ever worked on?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I think it's so funny because I have some like really great ones happening right now. And so I'm just like, but I can't talk about them just yet. I think like one of I like projects that tap into what I like to call like a sensibility. It's like, I've worked on books, goofy animal characters talking and, having, hijinks ensue and things like that. And, I've worked on, books with astronauts and, real life astronauts, actually. It's still awesome. But, there are projects that come into play that I love where it the book itself becomes an experience. It's not just a story. It's an experience from the point that you flip that cover open to the very first page of the book, and it pulls you in. And those are the projects that I absolutely love. Like those are the projects where we can really get into the meat and potatoes of and really dissect the book and be like, oh, well, we could do this with the back matter and, like really do some really cool things with that. So those are my favorite. I will say it was really special to work with Howard on Stuck Rubber Baby. That was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, he passed like literally like a week before we got finished copies in, which was really a bummer. You're welcome. But yeah.
All right, Rivka.
Hey, Kirk.
Hello.
Hello. My question is going to be probably really technical. When you're working with Pantone colors, I know that I've always heard that if ink coverage can get too heavy, it can create problems on the press or with printing. Is there so say I'm using like a secondary color to tone my comic and to shade it. Is there like a maximum opacity I should be using for that color so that doesn't create issues?
Yes, actually. And this is where InDesign actually comes in and can be your best friend. If you have what I would do is, I think 255 is, actually, let me see if I actually have, I don't think I have InDesign. I'm forgetting, there is a functionality in InDesign that will allow you to check ink density in your files. And there is a field, I'm totally not remembering the technical terms for everything. There's a field that you can put in the number value that that a publisher's production department deems the standard ink density for their projects. I believe the standard is around 255, something like that. So you put in 255 and you place that piece of art on that page. And then basically what this functionality will do is it will scan the piece of art and it will actually pinpoint, it'll show you a weird render of your art and will show you exactly where there might be some problems when you get on press. A lot of times, especially with picture book design, we'll go and we'll actually like slot all the art and all the pages And then we just turn this on, and then you can actually get a good assessment if there's any pages that are exceeding that density value. But you can get pretty thick with the ink. You're surprisingly thick with the ink.
Is that something that the art director will end up adjusting on their end at the end of the book? Or is that kind of something you should know when you're starting the book, if there might be issues you run into? Or is it just kind of like, on your end where to tweak things?
It's a little, there's like, we send our books out. For a second, not every publisher does this, but we will send our books out to a pre-press house to have the files prepped and ready for the printer. And so in that sense, they will do that on their end. We will, it's not like, we will check it if there are pages that look like they're going to be problematic. We will check it, but it's always good to be mindful of that kind of thing so that you don't create, because ultimately what that means is if there is a problem, that means you have to go back to the source art files and you have to make adjustments. And I would much rather my artists make those adjustments, not us or the pre-press house.
Cool. Thank you, Kirk.
You're very welcome.
All right, any last question, or we are gonna end on this highly technical note?
I have one more question, Kirk. How do you feel?
Oh, I feel very good. A little hot. I had to close all my windows right now because there were massive amounts of trucks driving down my street. But other than that, I feel very good. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right, well, how does everybody else feel? Was this a good, useful use of your 7 p.m. or for me it's 7 p.m. hour?
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
All right, well, I hope everybody can unmute yourself so we can say goodbye. I really wish we could be together in person, but this was really great. Kirk, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for
Thank
having
you,
me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk.
Thanks, Kirk.
Great talking to you.
Thank you. Okay, bye everybody. Good night.